When Florida officials started draining Stormwater Treatment Area 1 West, they expected a routine maintenance operation. Lower the water, inspect the sediment, and let the crews get to work. But when the water dropped below knee level, the biologists on site began making radio calls that weren't part of any protocol. What they found in that exposed mud wasn't supposed to exist, not at this scale, and not this close to areas the public visits every year, these very soft, suckery mouths. And so they latch onto the manatees and start grazing the algae off of their skin. Dr. Maria Santos, a wetland ecologist with 17 years of experience in Everglades restoration, was one of the first scientists to walk into that drained basin. What she discovered hiding beneath the surface would force her team to rethink everything they believed about how far the invasion had spread. The water had been keeping a secret. And once it was gone, there was no way to unsee what was living down there. The reveal: the water pulls back inch by inch. Morning sun hits the exposed mud, and steam rises from puddles that shrink by the minute. Dr. Santos steps carefully across the muck, her boots sinking with each step, and stops dead when she sees what's happening in front of her. Thousands of fish are crammed into shallow depressions no bigger than bathtubs. They thrash against each other, mouths gaping at the surface, fighting for oxygen that's disappearing fast. You get water invasive species like these guys right here. They're out of sight, out of mind. You don't really see the destruction like what you see the snakes down in the Everglades are doing. The sound is constant, wet slapping, splashing, the desperate percussion of animals running out of time, but it's not the dying fish that make Santos reach for her radio. It's what she sees wedged between them: armored catfish. Hundreds of them in this section alone. Their bony plates glint in the sunlight as they sit motionless in the mud, seemingly unbothered by the chaos around them. Santos later describes the scene as walking into an ambush you didn't know was set. These invaders had been hiding beneath the surface for years. Here's what makes these fish a nightmare. While native species gasp their last breaths in those shrinking puddles, the armored catfish barely react. They can breathe air for hours. Their modified intestines extract oxygen directly from the atmosphere. Draining the water doesn't kill them, it just exposes them. Santos moves closer to the bank and sees the real damage. Burrow entrances pockmark the exposed soil like bullet holes. She kneels down, shines a flashlight into one of the tunnels, and watches it disappear into darkness. These things go deep, she reports. Some run 6 feet back into the bank. The whole structure is compromised. The armored catfish don't just occupy the wetland, they excavate it. Destruction from these catfish is causing erosion because they create holes and burrow in them along the shore. Their digging destroys root systems, collapses soil structures, and creates erosion channels that drain water from areas meant to stay flooded. By the end of the first day, Santos documents over 12,000 armored catfish in a quarter-mile section, triple what their models predicted. We thought we had this under control, Santos admits. We were wrong by an order of magnitude. The armored invaders. Dr. Santos has tracked invasive species in the Everglades since 2006. She's seen walking catfish colonize drainage ditches and Asian swamp eels take over golf course ponds. But the armored catfish situation represents a different category of threat. These fish are tank-built survivors. Their bodies are covered in thick interlocking bony plates called scuts that form natural armor. Birds can't pierce them. Small alligators struggle to crack them open. The only reliable predators are large gators, and there aren't enough to make a dent in a population that reproduces this fast. But the armor isn't even the worst adaptation. These catfish are ecosystem engineers. They don't just live in an environment, they reshape it. A single fish can excavate a burrow 3 feet deep in days. Multiply that by thousands and you get the structural collapse Santos documented. The fish originally came from South America, likely released by aquarium owners. Now they're established across South Florida, and every drainage project reveals their territory has expanded further than the last survey showed. Santos puts it bluntly, we're not fighting fish. We're fighting construction crews that work 24 hours a day and can survive conditions that kill everything else. A century of drainage to understand why these invaders have so much habitat to colonize. You need one piece of historical context. Over the past century, Florida has drained more than half of the original Everglades. Millions of acres of slow-moving river of grass were converted to farmland, suburbs, and flood control infrastructure. The drainage enabled development, but it fragmented the ecosystem, degraded water quality with agricultural runoff, and created disturbed habitats where invasive species thrive while natives struggle. Now, billions are being spent on restoration. 10 years ago, Florida and the Army Corps of Engineers came up with a $2 billion plan to save what was left of the Everglades, now less than half its original size. The stormwater treatment areas where Santos works are man-made wetlands covering 57,000 acres, designed to filter polluted water before it reaches what remains of the natural Everglades. Every drainage reveals the same thing. Invaders are winning battles we didn't know were being fought. The snakes in the mud. 3 weeks after the catfish discovery, Santos gets called to a different site. The Picayune Strand Restoration Project has drained a section of an old agricultural canal. The crews clearing vegetation have found something that doesn't match any native species. Santos arrives just after noon. The humidity is crushing. Mosquitoes swarm in clouds thick enough to blur your vision. But the workers aren't swatting at bugs. They're standing in a loose semicircle, staring at the exposed canal bank, and nobody's moving. She pushes through and sees the burrow entrance, massive, at least 18 inches across, with claw marks scoring the mud around the rim. The tunnel angles downward into darkness, and the soil is packed hard, like something large has been sliding in and out for months. Santos knows what made this before she reaches for her flashlight: Burmese python. And from the size of the entrance, a big one. She radios for backup from the U.S. Geological Survey python team. While waiting, she counts 11 more burrow entrances within 100 yards. Some fresh with moist mud around the edges, others older and partially collapsed, but still accessible. This isn't a random snake. This is a colony. The removal team extracts snakes methodically. The first python comes out hissing, an 11-footer that takes 3 people to control. The second is bigger, 14 feet. Back in March of 2017, the Water Management District Governing Board charged us with creating an incentive program to essentially pay for 25 highly trained people to go out and remove as many pythons as possible. And that's what we have here today. But the third snake makes Santos's stomach drop. It's coiled in a chamber 4 feet underground, a cavern hollowed out over years of occupation. When they extract it, the python measures 19 feet 2 inches and weighs over 140 pounds. Its midsection bulges with something recently eaten. Santos stands in the mud, covered in sweat and python musk. This thing has been living here for years, she says, eating everything within a mile radius. And we had no idea until we drained the water. By day's end, 31 Burmese pythons are removed from Picayune, the largest concentration ever from a single Everglades location. These predators have caused 90% drops in small mammal populations. Rabbits, raccoons, possums, gone. And the food web collapses from the bottom up. The predator pit. The drainage continues through March. As water drops below 12 inches across most of the basin, something begins that Santos has only read about in old field reports. The remaining water funnels into natural depressions, and every predator funnels with it. Santos hears the predator pit before she sees it, deep rumbling bellows layered over splashing water and a constant bass note of hissing. Territorial conflict compressed into impossible density, she crests a rise and stops. Below her, in a depression half the size of a football field, hundreds of alligators are packed together in water that barely reaches their bellies. They're stacked on top of each other, jaws snapping at neighbors, tails thrashing mud into the air. The smell hits next: rotting fish, gator musk, and the sharp copper tang of blood. The alligators have been feeding on thousands of trapped fish. But they've also been fighting each other. Fresh gashes mark snouts and tails where disputes turned violent. Alligators are taking it to the extreme. Take a look at this video. These two massive gators fighting on land and then spilling into the water. Wildlife officials say these animals are extra aggressive this time of year as they try and mate. The noise is layered and constant: bellowing males, the crack of jaws slamming shut, splashing like cars dropping into a swimming pool, and beneath it all, continuous hissing from dozens of throats. Birds circle overhead: wood storks, great egrets, herons, flown in from miles away, drawn by easy prey. Santos watches a 12-foot gator lunge at one, jaws closing on the other animal's tail. They roll together, throwing spray 15 feet into the air. This is what happens when you compress an ecosystem into a space that can't hold it, Santos explains. Every hidden behavior becomes visible. It's chaos, but it's also data we couldn't get any other way. The predator pit persists for 3 days. Santos documents over 400 alligators in a space that normally holds 20. Her team tags 67 individuals for long-term tracking. The toxic legacy: while the animals make for dramatic visuals, the exposed mud carries longer-lasting consequences. When you drain a wetland, sediment that hasn't contacted air in years begins decomposing rapidly. Nutrients locked in the soil leak back into the water. The biggest concern is phosphorus from decades of agricultural runoff. The stormwater treatment areas absorb it, but drainage can reverse the process. When soil dries and cracks, stored nutrients escape downstream, fueling toxic algae blooms in receiving waters. Blue-green algae produces microcystin, a liver toxin dangerous to humans and animals. When blooms peak, they strip oxygen from water and cause massive fish kills. Santos also documents invasive apple snails throughout the drained area, bright pink egg masses clinging to dead vegetation. These snails carry rat lungworm, a parasite causing meningitis in humans. The drainage reveals they've spread further into protected zones than any previous survey indicated. Measurable victories: here's what the drainage data has actually produced. In controlled sites where Santos implemented targeted removal after surveys, invasive armored catfish populations dropped 62% over 18 months. Native largemouth bass increased 41%. Burrow networks began collapsing naturally once the excavators were removed, and native plant coverage in bank areas increased from 12% to 37%. The picayune python removal led to documented small mammal recoveries within a year. Camera traps showed marsh rabbits returning to areas where they hadn't been recorded in over a decade. Raccoon sightings increased 28%. We're not winning this war yet, Santos says. But for the first time, we're winning battles. Every drainage gives us intelligence we can't get any other way. When we act on it immediately, we see measurable improvement. The Everglades is fighting to survive. It just needs us to stop standing in its way. Every time Florida drains a wetland, we get intelligence that would be invisible otherwise. The Everglades is a World Heritage Site. It's an international biosphere. To get to that point very clearly shows that it has a uniqueness unto the world: the catfish counts, the python dens, the predator pits. It's ugly and sometimes terrifying. But it's the truth of what's happening beneath the surface. The hidden world of the swamp is coming to light, now that removal efforts show measurable results, the question is whether we have the will to scale them across the entire Everglades. If invasive populations dropped 60% where we took action, what happens if we do this everywhere? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe for more stories about what's really happening beneath the surface.